everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I guess if you're still here, you didn't mind that last episode that got kind of lengthy. An hour long is probably about the longest I will ever record. Like I always say, if this is your first time here, please go back to the beginning of the show, the very first podcast, and listen in order. Like Dorothy on the Yellow Brick Road, the experience needs to be consumed in order for it to make sense. And please pay attention to the show notes to look for definitions and links. So, why did I name this episode A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Animus? Because through exploring the work of my three most influential creators, who happen to be male, I believe I am essentially seeing aspects of my own animus being reflected in them. And because Dorothy approaches three male figures on her own journey, I thought I would try to draw some more comparison and contrast of the notion of animus along the way. I've briefly described the animus in a previous video, but I wanted to go into just a bit more depth. If you will recall, the animus is a female's masculine archetype, and the anima is a male's feminine archetype. They are opposite aspects of gender that create a footprint, if you will, of the qualities that we as humans possess of the opposite sex. It represents one's own opposite gender, creating balance between the two genders internally, making an individual whole. But it also forms a basis in which we measure all of the male or female figures in our life. We have all heard the term opposites attract. Well, that is true for a couple of reasons. Number one, our hormones encourage biodiversity within the species. They literally drive us towards genetics that will help our offspring survive. You think your brain or your heart or your eyes are choosing that mate, but it is fundamentally your hormones. Number two, psychologically speaking, opposites attract because we seek balance to our weaknesses externally. A more family-oriented person, community, female, often chooses a more competitive, hierarchical male. That does create diverse offspring, but it often becomes a marital issue as the opposite ways they see the world over a lifetime can grow more incompatible. What would be a better scenario is both individuals fully expressing both the community and the hierarchical assets, so they rely on the other person for balance. If each person is balanced in the relationship, then they can negotiate problem spots more easily. I'm no psychologist, of course, and it isn't all that easy to do, but we would all be healthier if we were whole as an individuated person before we entered into serious partnerships. Can you see where you and your partner are opposites in ways that are male-female dependent? And where does a woman's notion of ideal man come from? I mean, even in childhood, we as young girls begin developing a sense of what type of man we want to marry. Now, I'm not going to get into discussing modern variations on that gender discussion, so I am speaking traditionally. But really, where does that notion begin? Jung proposes that it comes from something so deep that it belongs to the realm of the collective unconscious, a space that exists inside each and every one of us, but at the same time is very personal. The personification of animus is unique to each individual as an expression of not only that fundamental archetype, but as one covered in layers attributed to the individual's own personal experiences that accrue as they mature. A 12-year-old girl may see an ideal man being represented by her father or any other significant male influence in her life. But as she matures and produces her own experiences, that animus may evolve into something else, something completely different, but probably still maintaining the attributes of that original figure. One can easily see how that perspective alone can spawn mental health issues if that original figure isn't a healthy one, or if that original relationship isn't a healthy one. So let's talk about Dorothy's companions in the movie. In an earlier video, I discussed the notion that the characters represent aspects of Dorothy's own archetypes that seem to be lacking some ability or personality trait keeping them from being healthy. But now I want to take that a step further and say they may specifically be male attributes attributed to the Animus that are out of balance and needing to be alchemized into Dorothy's collective as a whole for her own health and well-being. Basically, these male attributes have been undeveloped in her immaturity and are needing to be explored and recognized so they can be integrated. In each case, I can see how the male figures long for balance. Again, I have gone over much of this, but to reframe using the Animus as a guide, the Scarecrow thought he needed to be smart so he could outwit the crows. But he was already wise, which was a much better measure of his intelligence. I would argue that he also lacked confidence, which is all the wizard gave him in the end, by giving him a diploma. Why would I refer to the Scarecrow as a male archetype? Because he is trying to prove his worth, which has hierarchical dominance associations, according to psychology. The Scarecrow is balancing his male-female aspects. Now, the Tin Man thought he needed to have a heart to be like a human, so he could really feel. But he was still only made of metal. In this context, he symbolizes the social limitations put on boys and men to not express their feelings, especially when it comes to deep emotions, essentially ignoring their own anima. The wizard's gift to him was a mere placebo, much like the diploma was for the Scarecrow. The Tin Man is learning to balance his male-female aspects as well. Now, the lion was born to be a sissy without the vim and verve. I think this says it all. The perspective here is that somehow being afraid means you aren't a man. Just using the word sissy as a self-deprecating insult shows us that this lion struggles with the dichotomy of his instincts. How can one be king of the forest if they have fear? I will take this a step further and say the actual struggle is between his own female and male attributes. He is sensitive, but does that really make him unfit to be king? He actually possesses everything he needs to rule the forest as a kind and compassionate lion who can discriminate between what is safe and what isn't. In a more realistic sense, a lion that knows to fear humans will help the survival of his pride. He is able to overcome his aggressive instinct, to recognize it doesn't always pay to try to conquer fear with aggression. Again, all the wizard does is reinforce his courage by giving him a medal. In essence, another placebo. In each case, these masculine attributes at play in Dorothy's wheelhouse of archetypes. Her journey down the Yellow Brick Road is in part about integrating and balancing these archetypes into her own psyche. She does this by bringing them along on her journey to home. So beautiful, really. My discussion of my own guides, or maybe they are my muses, I don't know. I have to think about that, but I do think the three creators I'm going to mention have something to say that really brings out my own animus. I love having intelligent, empathetic, and big picture masculine creators in my life. Okay, now let's talk about these three influences. Number one. The first one came to me in the form of an audio-only podcast right after finishing Ancient Aliens. I wanted to dig into something a bit more serious on the topic of NHI as I was getting comfortable acknowledging my own contact experience. I wanted something that had a scientific approach that would help me better understand not just my experience, but what was happening in that bigger picture. A quick search in Apple Podcasts brought up a pretty big list of pods dedicated to the subject of NHI. But being a label shopper, I landed on Exo Academian's Point of Convergence podcast. He started out reading excerpts out of literature, then expounding on it. But after a few episodes, he got into interviewing experts. It's all very interesting stuff, but what really grabbed me was when he started aligning the alien experience with spiral dynamics, integral theory, and quantum physics. Now we're talking. Get into it deep. The podcast count is well over 100 now, and he has entered the YouTube cinema, so he remains very accessible. A footnote is that XO is out of the proverbial closet now. When he first started, he felt he needed to be anonymous to protect his job. He is an experiencer himself, but by following his passion, he was able to take his career into the realms in which could combine those passions with his vocation. I guess you could say he found his ikigai. His name is Darren King, and I would encourage you to follow him. I will be highlighting the subjects I mentioned in his work above in future podcasts. Number 2, Stuart Davis and the audio-only podcast called Aliens and Artists. Stuart discusses in his expansive podcast everything related to artists, creativity, and alien contact experiences. He is another experiencer asking difficult questions. Some of his content crosses XOs, but where it does, it's in a different context. This guy is a creative genius, and his contact experience is interesting. It has clearly influenced his creative passion for the subject and bringing it to the public. His library also contains over 100 episodes. He covers not only NHI, but block universe, quantum realms, and philosophy. My third is Michael Phillip and his YouTube channel called Third Eye Drops. This is my current binge where I've been introduced to an incredible cast of physicists, philosophers, psychologists, cognitive scientists, neurosurgeons, just to name a few. His podcast is not about the NHI genre, but it is included. Discussions are more Jung and Plato-centric, but goes into a plethora of topics ranging from broader things such as idealism, reality, spirituality, quantum physics. He has a back catalog of over 300 audio-only files and is a prolific creator on YouTube. But watch for episodes by Eric Godsey, Corey Allen, Bob Peck, Molly Adler, and more. To tie up the concept of Anima Animus, our job as individuals striving for individuation is to understand that we should not seek others or outside relationships in an effort to complete ourselves. Instead, our goal should be balanced and complete all by ourselves. Anima plus animus, all in here. Only then can one be in the healthiest of relationships. And this is easier said than done. Thank you for being here. Please drop a like, subscribe, and share if you're enjoying this podcast. Let the algorithm know you were here. And if you want to financially support this channel, please go to our patreon.com/IARTHAUS and join one of our membership levels. This will give you access to our Patreon-only Discord server where like-minded individuals gather to riff on the topics I will cover here. Also, my website, iarthouse.com, is where you can find all of our creative content, including music, visual art, and will also be the location of the Yellow Brick Road Rash store. Last but not least, I'm looking for someone with a connection to Dr. Donald Hoffman to hook me up. I just want to meet him and have dinner with him and his wife. Bucket list things. So, oh yeah, and also, I am really nervous about interviewing people, but I am committed to doing this at some point. If you are loving what I'm doing and just want to riff with me on camera about stuff, I will be taking requests through our membership community on Patreon. My plan is to develop a little questionnaire for you to fill out and submit if you're interested. I will let you know when this goes live. But I'm out of here. Later.